Hello students, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 10, Lesson 1. This lesson has a ton of information. They always do. I tell you, McGraw-Hill sure does pack a lot of information in these lessons, like sardines in a can. As such, I strongly advise you to read the book so you don't miss anything. Today's lesson covers China's geography and the first two dynasties, arguably three, but they are called the Shang and the Zhou. So, what do we actually already remember about ancient China? I think dragons, Great Wall of China. Let's learn more, shall we? Whoop. Okay. So, many of the first civilizations began on rivers. Such is the case with China. The Huang River, or Yellow River, which is what the Huang River means, starts in the western mountains of China and winds its way eastward. The Huang is called the Yellow River because it carries a thick yellow soil called loess. This loess is deposited when the river floods, providing great soil for farming. As was the case, however, with many rivers that flooded, it provided a blessing and a curse. It's said in your textbook that the flooding of the Huang River is responsible for the death of millions of people. But the earliest farming occurred on the Huang River. But over time, farming spread south to the other rivers, such as the Shangyang and Yangtze rivers. Up north, on the Huang, they grew a lot of wheat. South on the Shangyang and Yangtze, they grew rice. So China sounds like a really great place to be a farmer, right? Actually, not so much. Only 1/10 of China's land can be farmed. There are mountains galore, and don't forget the Gobi Desert. In the west, there's China, and you see a great deal of it is looking very much not brown, and a lot of it is looking quite mountainous. Not a lot of great green places to farm. So, a lot of their land can't be used for it. So let's talk about this first Chinese dynasty. It is surmised by archaeologists that the first villages in China, developed on the Huang River. But there's a bit of folklore here. Legend says that a guy by the name of Yu the Great was the first to tame the Huang River. It is said he chased away an evil dragon that caused the flooding. And then with the help of other dragons, he dug canals to divert water during the floods. After this project of 13 years digging these canals and chasing away evil dragons, he founded his first dynasty, the Xia. It's said this happened in 2000 BC. The problem is there's actually no evidence that a Xia dynasty ever existed. So the first dynasty they're able to determine as fact was the Shang dynasty. So the Shang built China's first cities. They found cities, they were built by the Shang. The Shang Empire started as a small kingdom, but spread, through conquest, as they usually do. The empire ended up controlling most of the Huang River Valley. The king was at the top. He was the top dog in the Shang Empire, but had local warlords govern the subsections of empires, kind of like governors might run a state. Warlords is basically a term for a person in charge that rules through military power. Like they're in charge because they have the soldiers. The upper class of this ancient Chinese empire was made up of aristocrats. This group of nobles and military leaders derived their power from land ownership. Most of the people were farmers that worked the land, for the aristocrats. There were only a small amounts of merchants, slaves, and even artisans. The ancient Chinese were polytheistic, and we know that means they believed in many gods. The main god, however, was Shang-Ti, that ruled over the other gods. The Chinese, even to this day, place a large emphasis on their ancestors. So it's like your dead family members. Today, folks in China will even go to temples and leave offerings for their ancestors. They might burn small articles that they think that their ancestors would need in the afterlife. So the king of the Shang Empire was the leader of government, the military, and religion, and he would consult ancestors before making a big decision by consulting oracle bones. In your book there's a nice picture of oracle bones. There's a little thing they do, but it might be compared to rolling dice today. Okay, the gods think I should do this, or this will happen. They make these determinations with these oracle bones. Now, the ancient Chinese language used both pictographs and ideographs. A pictograph is a symbol that represents an object, and an ideograph links multiple pictographs to come into a more complex word or idea. So for this example, you see, alright, there's a pictograph. It's a man picture and a woman picture and a wall picture. And you put them all together and you end up with, instead of multiple words, one word's kind of made up of all these different characters, which is toilets or bathroom. So that's how that works. That's the difference between a pictograph and an ideograph. Yep, smash some pictures together, make a more complex idea. They liked bronze in the Shang Empire. They made a great many things out of it, such as urns, weapons, vases, and cups. They also made some pretty smooth silks. Chinese silk would become a main export, but not until later. I forgot to mention that the geography of China, with all those mountains, particularly off to the west in the desert, made China somewhat isolated for quite a long time. In fact, they called themselves the Middle Kingdom because they were the only kingdom that they knew existed, so they thought that they were kind of the middle of the earth. The middle of the world, if you will. Alright, let's talk about the Zhou. It looks like Zhou, or Zhao, pronounced Joe. Word on the street is that the last of the Shang kings was a real piece of work. Nobody liked him or his tyrannical rule, and as a result, rebels led by an aristocrat named Wu Wang overthrew him. And this began the new dynasty of the Zhou, which would rule for 800 years, which is actually the longest lasting of the Chinese dynasties. So the rule of the Zhou was pretty similar to that of the Shang, actually. The empire grew by conquest, and the king was ultimately in charge. He was a religious, military, and government leader. He had loyal aristocrats run his little sub-districts, like his provinces, throughout the empire, and their positions were hereditary, so that means if you were in charge of this little section of the Zhou Empire, your son would be in charge next, and then his son. Like a monarchy, essentially. Yeah, they keep it in the family. So the Zhou Empire, there was a belief that the ruler was chosen by the gods. They called this the mandate of heaven. That's actually quite a burden for a ruler, and as such, that they were chosen by the gods, they had better do a good job. There was a proper way that a ruler was supposed to rule in order to please the gods. This was called the Tao, which literally means the way. So if something really bad happened, like there's a natural disaster or a drought, they would assume that the ruler was not following the Tao, and they could work to have him replaced. Here's the picture I found when I googled Mandate of Heaven. See, he is chosen by the gods. So, as time progressed, the aristocrats that ran the kingdom actually they became more powerful, and they started to think themselves, I'm so powerful, I don't need to listen to the king. And a lot of them thought that they essentially got too big for their britches and stopped listening to the king, and you ended up having a period of multiple little kingdoms fighting for control of China. This time period lasted from 400 to 200 BC, and is called the period of warring states. It was basically a large civil war between all these different little kingdoms that basically decided they weren't going to be a part of the Zhou Empire anymore, and they just stopped listening to the king. So the Zhou Empire was over. Now you had a whole bunch of little warring states fighting for control. They would fight for 200 years before basically a winner emerged. Someone came to the top of the pile, and that would be a new dynasty. But we'll talk about that in the next lesson. Your quiz is simple. 5 multiple choice questions. It's worth 10 points. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.